Ladies, sometimes I think we forget what it is we are doing when we gather in a place like this together, when we gather as the body of Christ, as the church. One of my mentors, one of my heroes, Dr. Peter Kraft, he's a wonderful Catholic philosopher, great thinker. He has a wonderful reminder for times like this. So today I want us to enter into what we're doing with this mentality of understanding that we are meeting in secret and the Lion of Judah meets us here. Because what we are doing is actually plotting a revolution against the prince of this world. Every time you walk through these doors, every time you gather as the church, whether collectively as the local body or in small gatherings, that is what you are doing. Which I think is why the writer Annie Dillard, who has dabbled with Christianity, specifically Catholicism throughout her life, but is not a practicing Christian anymore, yet she looks at the church with curiosity. And in a book that she wrote called Teaching a Stone to Talk, she said, I don't understand Christians, not really. She said, I don't understand when I look at them and they seem like mindless tourists on a tour of the absolute. It's ludicrous for ladies to wear straw hats to church. They should be wearing crash helmets. She said the ushers should just lash us to our pews because the sleeping God might awaken someday and draw us out to where we can never return. Right? I knew I was with my people this morning. So as we enter into loving God with all of who we are, loving him with our minds this morning as we do some Christian apologetics, I want us to remember that. We are not, as Annie would also say, children who have received a TNT set and just idly playing in the floor or a chemistry set, she said. We haven't just received a chemistry set sitting in the floor mixing up a batch of TNT. Like we are dealing with powerful stuff this morning. That's the nature of Christianity, the true story of reality. All right, we're going to talk about moral relativism. Let me get into what I mean by that. But because we're into Christian apologetics and we have some guests, let me introduce that term. It does not mean anything what we would think about when it comes to apologizing. When I called my dad and I said, I'm going to go study Christian apologetics as a master's degree program, my dad said, baby girl, because I'm from the South, so he's still daddy and it's always going to be that way. He said, baby girl, what exactly does Christianity have to be sorry about? That is not how we raised you. I said, Daddy, that is not at all what I'm saying. Apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia, and it's a word that simply means to give reasons for something. Christian apologetics is the art of offering reasons for the truth claims of Christianity. We're going to be hanging out in a particular branch of that, dealing with morality today. The question we're going to be asking is moral truth real? Can we know it? Or is it something that we decide for ourselves? Rule number 1 of Christian apologetics is that ideas have consequences. Ideas have consequences. Some writers put it this way, ideas have legs. Because we are the holders of ideas and we live those ideas out in the world. So they have very real consequences. My friend John Stonestreet, director of the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, will tell you that dangerous ideas have victims. Ideas have consequences. Dangerous ideas have victims. And sometimes we forget that Christianity is very much a thinking faith. I know this group hasn't forgotten that. But as a reminder, if we go to the next slide, Paul has told us that all along in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, where he was defending his own ministry. He said it this way, we walk in the flesh, but we do not wage war according to the flesh. We're not carrying around gladiator swords. Our weapons, he says, are not of the flesh, but they have divine power to destroy strongholds. And I think we could almost replace that word strongholds with maybe worldviews. That's kind of a common word today that we use. Ways of looking at the world, sets of ideas that form beliefs that we then live out in the world. It's all about the ideas. He goes on to say, we destroy arguments We tear down lofty opinions raised up against the knowledge of God. We take thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ. Ideas, 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 ideas. We love God with our whole selves, and that includes our mind. And 1 Peter 3:15 and 16, where we see that little word, apologia, tells us exactly how we go about doing that. That we offer reasons, apologia, for the hope that is within us, but that we do that with gentleness and respect. One other thing I'll tell you with that word gentleness, because this is just a cool little scripture nugget that we sometimes miss. The word gentle brings to mind many things. We think about maybe being a little bit helpless, weaker. One who is gentle is not as strong or powerful. Let me get this adjusted. We'll see how that goes. I move too much. That's the problem. But when we see that word gentle, it's used several times throughout the scriptures. Jesus uses the word in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the meek. The Greek word is praus, P-R-A-U-S, if you want that transliteration or how to spell it, praus. He also uses the word when he describes himself in Matthew 11, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, I am lowly, gentle, and humble of heart. I will give you rest for your souls. But we see that word here too, gentleness and respect, praus. The Greek word praus was used to describe horses that had once been wild and were brought unto submission. In other words, all of that power was harnessed such that those were the horses chosen to ride into battle, because they were the ones who could respond to the gentlest touch of the master. Oftentimes, it was a leg or a knee or a shin, just gentle pressure, and they would not flinch in the face of arrows flying at them. So when we do this great work of tearing down lofty opinions and ideas raised against the knowledge of God, and we take thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ, we do it with praus, gentleness, and respect. It has nothing to do with being helpless. It has everything to do with tremendous strength brought under control. All right, this is going to be a practical session this morning. I hope that we walk away with a different posture. That's the goal. So let's dive in. I'm going to show you an image of the place that I lived for the last 7 years until this past August. Manitou Springs, Colorado. Beautiful place, but I'm sitting here in Tucson going like, yeah, they don't really care because they have all the beauty out of their doors. It is a different kind of beauty, but Manitou Springs is tucked right into the front range of the Rocky Mountains. Really wonderful. You've got an image of the downtown area there. And there's a place in Manitou Springs called the Colorado Custard Company. Now, I show you this place, and in the next slide, there's actually, you can see where it is exactly. So in case you decide to visit Manitou, take a photograph. You're welcome for future reference. My house was located on the hill across the street from the Colorado Custard Company, just up on the hillside. So when I looked out my office window, I had a direct line of vision to what was happening there. The Colorado Custard Company was run by a man named Matt Carpenter for many years. Matt Carpenter won the Pikes Peak Marathon 13 times. Ladies, this is how he was doing it. He was selling custard to the masses so that when I would look out my office window and see it, it would beckon to me and call to me. It was like the Lord's test in my life every day. Now, there's one dessert at the Colorado Custard Company called the Mountaineer. The Mountaineer. I'll show you what it looks like in that next slide. The Mountaineer, let me tell you a little bit about it. It is a vanilla custard base made fresh that day. Now, I don't know if you know a lot about custard, but I've learned a few things. It is thicker than ice cream. So it is not mere ice cream. It has less oxygen content and more egg, so protein, health food. Like basically, it's a health food. I am the apologist. We can make an argument. Vanilla custard base, a scoop of fresh raspberries put into that base, and that's whirled around like a Dairy Queen blizzard. And then Matt would walk over to the hot fudge, and he would pump molten fudge down into the center of that concoction. Right? Are our mouths watering yet? He would put a spoon in it, and he would hand it to me. If I tipped him, he had to tell me a dad joke. That was the tradition. And then I would take the Mountaineer, and I would take the first bite. And ladies, the skies would part, and the angel choir would begin singing. And it was a religious experience. So we're going to start with the mountaineer, and I want to make a couple of claims about it. Claim number one, the mountaineer, as I have just described it to you in painful detail, is the best dessert on the face of the planet. Do I have anyone in this crowd who would agree with me and say that is a true statement? Yes, Megan, I will go with you on that. Francie, we can be friends. Any others, like a sympathy vote? Nobody? Okay, yeah, sure. She's like, I'll go for that. I'm a loving person. It's fine. That can be my new favorite. Is anybody offended that I think that's true? I'm from Georgia. Y'all, we can fight over lots of things. The merits of sweet tea and college football. Some people are very serious about their desserts. Okay, nobody cares. A little bit. She's like, that triggers me a little bit. Okay. Let me make another claim. The mountaineer is the cure for juvenile diabetes. Anybody think that one's true? Don't raise your hand. If you started to raise your hand, we'll pray for you, your table mates. No. Crazy. Those are two different types of claims, obviously. We're going to start very simple and wade deeper as we go because we've got a lot of different levels in the room. I want to hear from you, what are some differences in those claims? Because there are several. What are some differences between those two claims? Observations, go. First one was my opinion. Good. What else? Okay, one, how I feel about it, and one, what it does. I'm repeating for the recording. Yep, good. And, yeah. One, how you feel about it, and one, what it does. Okay, the first was about my preference, but the second, I was trying to, make it into something beneficial. But what was wrong with that? It's not true, right? So we might even argue that another consequence another difference would be the consequences in believing those claims. If I believed the first one, no big deal, right? Nobody really even cared that I thought that was the best dessert. But if I believe the second one, we have a problem. Some of you guys are like, Susie, Megan needs to clearly go back and study the workings of the pancreas. Or something, basic biology, I don't know. So we have these two different claims. I'm going to give us some terms that we can work with for the rest of our time together this morning. The first claim told you something about me. It was about me. You guys nailed it. It was an opinion. It was a preference claim. We're going to call it a subjective kind of claim. Now, subjective truths work this way. If you are talking about a subjective truth, that truth is about you, the subject. Just like the subject of a sentence is what the sentence is about, a subjective truth is about you, the subject. Subjective truths deal with matters of personal preference because you just talked about you, your opinions, your preferences. These are truths that we create because they are matters of personal preference. And because of all of these things, all subjective truths are equally valid. They're all true, in the same kind of true. Like, you didn't care that that was my favorite dessert because, quite frankly, my preference has no more authority than your preference. We're all fine with that. You do you, boo, when it comes to the custard. But the second claim, we ran into something different. The second claim, it turns out, wasn't about me. This was an objective kind of claim. The claim was about the custard and its relationship to the disease. The objects in question, we can call them. That's what the claim was about. Objective truths are truths that exist independently of the subject. That means they're true whether I prefer them or not. They're true whether I'm even aware of them or not. Objective truths are the ones you discover. You don't create them. You discover them. And then if you go with me here, for that reason, when I make an objective kind of claim, my objective claim can be true or false. It can be right or wrong by its very nature. You can usually bring some evidence to the table to demonstrate why it's true or why it's false. All right? Subjective, objective. I'm going to throw one more thing up there because this is a tough thing to wrap our heads around. It took me a long time, and I find that with especially the students that my husband and I work with often, like at Summit Ministries, this is the conversation we have the whole time. They'll get this lecture on day 1 or 2, and we're still wrestling with it later, and that's okay. But this was helpful for me. When it comes to objective truths, not just claims, but truths, you cannot make an objective truth true by your belief in it. In other words, your believing in it doesn't make it true. It either is or isn't true. In the same way, and this is where we're going to get into our culture, gets real sticky with this one. You cannot make an objective truth false because you don't believe in it. Your disbelief in it doesn't make it false. An objective truth exists independently of us. So we live in a world that has subjective truths and objective truths, and now we get to have a pop quiz to make sure we know the difference. So we'll go to the next slide. We're going to play a little game. Now, I will tell you this. I see some of you writing furiously, right? And if note-taking is your spiritual gift, I feel you. So here's what I'm going to do. I will send Susie notes over these sessions. That'll have it'll have the basic stuff in the slides. It'll have the quotes. It'll have a lot of the main material, the bones of it. So just write down what is important to you, and you'll get the rest. All right? So everybody can be like, Some people are going to be writing anyway, and I see you, and I'm like, I love you. You are my people, and that's okay. All right, I'm going to make some claims, and you're going to tell me the nature of the claim. Your answer will either be subjective or objective. Got it? That's the game. Very simple. Number 1, M&Ms are clearly superior to Reese's Pieces. It is a subjective claim. When I'm in a room, some of us are missing the objective. It's okay. When I'm in a room with like middle school boys, it's typically like, true. I'm like, that was not the game. The leaves on the trees tend to change color as the seasons change. What kind of claim is that? Objective. Like some of you are like, we could have a whole conversation about chlorophyll right now. Let's go. It is objective, and you could show me why that is the case. All right, number 3, my husband Tripp is the most handsome man alive. Careful. Some of you are like, we could do battle over this one. Now, if he walked into the room right now, you guys would be like, you could make an argument. It's a subjective claim. The University of Georgia's women's gymnastics team is the best in the country. That was the trick question of the morning. What would you need to know from me? You would need to ask me some clarifying questions. Megan, what do you mean by saying they're the best team? Are you talking about your preference in gymnastics teams, or are they currently ranked number 1 in the NCAA, right? So you would need some clarification. They're not currently ranked number 1. Going into nationals, I believe Florida holds that position, so we'll see what happens. All right. Let's try a couple of others. I'm going to shift gears. Jesus of Nazareth died on a Roman cross and 3 days later rose from the dead. Okay? Good. Finally, it is wrong to torture toddlers for fun. I had a question. Define torture. Yeah. I'm in a room with women, so no, I get it. We need coffee and a lot of Jesus. I had no responses. What kind of claim? And now we're overthinking. Like some of us will never babysit my children, okay? I did it on purpose, and I got exactly what I expected. The last two claims I made were different from the others. They were a religious claim and a moral claim. I made the claim about Jesus, which you guys rightly identified, having just celebrated Easter, that is a historical claim. We can verify that. There is excellent evidence to indicate that the resurrection of Jesus is the best explanation of what happened that day in history. We could talk about that later if you want to. It's incredible. Most of the time, if I make a religious claim in a mixed setting, I will get a mixed response. Some will say, that's objective, and some will say, oh, that's religious. That's a subjective claim. When I made the last claim, it was a moral claim. It is wrong to torture toddlers for fun, and I got exactly what I expected. Even in Christian audiences, at best, I'll get a mixed response. But most of the time, many times, I get an overwhelming response of, that is subjective. And that's why we're gathered to talk about this today. We live in a society that has adopted the idea that religious, moral, and value claims, we're going to be talking about beauty this afternoon, that is a value thing, that these things are subjective in nature, that they're the kinds of things that originate with you and your preferences. You create them, and they're all equally valid. What that is called is moral relativism. It's a view of morality, and that's what we're going to tackle today. The point I'm going to make for you guys is that moral relativism is bankrupt. It doesn't work. It's not a livable way to view morality. Now, in terms of big worldview ideas, Christianity, if we want to define it in that way, it's a worldview. It's a way of understanding reality. But there are other ways people understand reality. Our question is, there's only one reality. So which of these worldviews is the best explanation of the way the world really is? I'm a Christian because I think that it's objectively true. That's the only reason you should believe in anything. Moral relativism is a view of morality held by some other worldviews. Any of the materialistic worldviews, the ones that say that matter is all there is, everything is physical, there's no supernatural or immaterial that can be, they would have to hold to moral relativism because there's no grounding for morality outside of each of us. Moral relativism says that there is no objective standard for what is good. In other words, there's no real morality, no standard by which we can judge anything to be better than anything else. Rather, morality is something that we create and decide for ourselves, whether as a society, collectively, or as individuals. So that's moral relativism. We're going to be looking at moral relativism in a few ways in our time together. I want to talk about it with you guys in terms of what this does to our posture. When we understand this is not the case, and I'll get there in just a second, what does that do to our posture? I want to talk about some examples of where we will see this, some of the language that you're going to hear, a couple of maybe stickers or memes or things that you'll see where moral relativism is the culprit, because once you see it, you can't really unsee it. So that's kind of the goal for that time. I want to talk about how we got to now. Because the notion that morality is up to us to decide for ourselves and is not real and knowable is a peculiarly modern notion. It hasn't been around all that long. It's been like an hour ago, historically speaking. But it's the air that all of us have breathed in our time that we've been alive. And so then I want to talk about 4 types of moral relativism that we will run into and why they don't work. So that's where we're going with our time. Some of you are like, I needed the outline. Now I've got it. There you go for the note takers. All right. When I made those last 2 claims, the religious claim and the moral claim, the claim about Jesus and the claim about toddlers, I actually was not talking about myself at all. The claims were not about Megan. They had nothing to do with my preferences. They weren't about me. The claims, both of them, were about the nature of reality. They are objective kinds of claims. And those claims either accurately describe the way the world really is or the way the events really happened, or they don't. In fact, no matter the religious claim or moral claim anyone is making, it is an objective kind of claim because it describes reality. Those are the rules we play by. I haven't made a case for whether my moral claims are right yet, but morality must be understood this way. Moral relativism says it's not. So just that little demonstration goes, there's a problem with this. Sometimes in a conversation we have to work that out. But this does a number of things to our posture. And if you take nothing else away from today, I hope that you take this part with you. Understanding that these things are objective in nature does something to us. I think that one of the reasons conversations go so off the rails right now is because our culture has adopted the notion that morality is a subjective thing. If it's subjective, if it is, that means it's mine. I created it. It's my preferences. So when you attack my moral view on something, guess who you've just attacked? Me. I think people who adopt this idea are walking around feeling like it's personal all the time. When in reality, ladies, hear this in the most loving possible way. It's not about you. The rightness or wrongness of moral decision making isn't about anything you have created. It's not about you. And just in that is a refreshing freedom to realize I don't have to take it personally. I don't have to be offended. If Christianity is objectively true, ladies, hear me, it will stand apart from you. All you have to do is point to it. Walk it out. Live it. Talk about it. Worship the Lord in all of your doings and living. We'll talk about plenty of that as the day goes on. But you don't have to armor yourself to defend against someone you're talking to. Hold that thought for just a minute. We live in a world that I think is trying really hard not to be arrogant. Nobody wants to be viewed as arrogant. In fact, we are kind of killing ourselves with kindness. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about kindness. Let's be kind, but let's be gentle. Praus. That means that when I make moral claims and think that I'm right about them, the people who are hearing me take it as, man, she is arrogant. That sounds so arrogant. I'll give you an example. Most of the work that I do is in the realm of pro-life apologetics. I'm going to take a risk in that because I don't know what the views are on that in the room. So I'm going to ask for some grace because I'm not making an argument for that right now. We could talk about that later if you want to. But my claim when it comes to that is that abortion is wrong because it intentionally kills innocent human beings. When I make that claim, I have excellent reasons for standing there objectively, and I think I'm right about it. I think people who disagree with me are, respectfully, wrong in their view. Now, just then when I said that, did you feel the push? Maybe you guys didn't, because I'm kind of with my people today in terms of understanding how these conversations work. But oftentimes I'll have people who raise their eyebrows as if to say, I could never say that. That sounds so arrogant. Backpedal just a little bit. If these things are objective in nature, that means that by their very nature, the claims that I make can be right or wrong, true or false, which means when I make my claim about abortion being wrong, I actually submit to everyone here that it is possible that I could be what about that? I could be wrong about that. When I say that Christianity is the true story of reality because it's the best explanation of the way the world actually is, it's possible that I could be what about that? Ooh, I could be. I could be, because that's how objective claims work. They can be right or wrong, true or false. Ladies, that is a humble position. When I am making an objective moral or religious claim, I'm acting out of humility. Now, could I be arrogant in my tone? Yeah. Could I be arrogant in my posture or my body language or any other way? So many things that I must be gentle, praus, and self-controlled about. But to say that I'm right about this and have excellent reasons for standing here is not arrogant. It's humble. If it's true, it'll stand. If it's true, you always come from a position of tremendous strength, not weakness, even if you don't know all the answers. If it's true, you don't have to be afraid. 1 Peter 3, have no fear of them, but honor Christ the Lord as holy. You've already decided this is true. Not true for me. True. So go back to what that does to the posture. You don't have to be personally offended because you know it's not about me. If somebody comes and questions your moral position on something, it should be equivalent to them coming up and saying something like, I believe that 2 + 2 is 5. To which my response would be, really? Okay, that's not my view. But you got to tell me how you got there. It's probably Common Core. That's probably how they got there. I miss old math. Can we just... Mom's a school teacher, so I can make the joke maybe. If somebody comes and says, I don't believe in God, I think that the whole notion of God is a crutch. I think it's an opiate for the people, Karl Marx said. You don't have to be offended. It's not about you. Your first response is curiosity. Really? Okay, that's not my view, but you got to tell me, how did you get there? What do you mean by God? Well, I don't believe there's some angry bearded man in the sky throwing lightning bolts down and judging everybody. You're like, great, I don't believe in that God either. We agree. The point is, your position is one of curiosity and an openness to learn about them because you've realized it's not about me. This changes our posture to where you become entirely countercultural in the way that you approach these conversations in the best possible way. So you're not arrogant, you're humble. So don't act arrogant. It's not about you, so you don't have to be afraid, intimidated, or anything else. Just ask a good question, and then you're in a conversation with the other person. Shockingly countercultural right now. All right, examples of where we see moral relativism. I'm going to pull from the pro-life arguments because after Roe v. Wade was overturned not even a handful of years ago, this meme started making its circulation. It was a bumper sticker before this, pretty common, but it came back with full force. If you don't like abortion, then don't have one. Problem solved. Oh, you don't like abortion? Don't have one. There. Wasn't that easy? Ladies, notice the word like. With what we've just learned, what we realize is this has taken an objective moral issue, no matter your position on the issue, it's taken an objective moral issue and tried to twist it into a matter of mere preference. And it's not that kind of issue. That becomes very clear to us if I ask the question, or if I had said, what if the bumper sticker or the meme said this? Oh, you don't like slavery, don't own one. Problem solved. Oh, you don't like spousal abuse. Well, then don't beat your spouse. There, wasn't that easy? That hits different because we have enough residue where we see that some moral issues are not matters of mere preference. Others, and abortion is one of them, this moral relativism piece has become a major hurdle in our conversations about these issues. Other examples of relativism as we'll see it in the culture, just common language that we see, live your truth, you do you, YOLO. Love is love. What does it matter? What does it mean to you? Don't even get me started on linking verbs, you guys. Love is not love in that way. Predicate nominatives, predicate adjectives, yada, yada. Don't listen, not, okay? Drives me nuts. No, there is love that looks very different from other love. Coexist has more to do with a general relativism, a pluralistic view that all religions can be the same. What's the big deal? Guys, it's not the similarities that get us in trouble. It's the differences, right? My boss and mentor, Greg Kokel, will tell you I could have 2 white tablets in my hands. They look exactly the same in appearance. They're both white, a little bit chalky. They both have the letter A engraved on them. Can't tell them apart. They look the same. But what if I were to tell you that one of them is aspirin and one of them is arsenic? It's not the similarities, it's the differences that matter. More examples of where we see it in our language. That might be true for you, but that is not my truth. How many of you have heard that phrase? Many of us have. I would never do this or that, but I can't tell other people what's right or wrong for them. Guys, that's moral relativism. Let me give you an example. On a college campus, I met a young woman. I was there working with the pro-life group on campus, teaching them how to have good conversations because they wanted to hold an event on the public forum of the campus where they were having conversations about the abortion issue. And so I went in and did a training with them and hung out for the event. And they were having a great day. It was going really, really well. But a young woman saw what was happening, overheard it as she was walking to class, ran to her dorm room, and made a poster really fast. You could tell because it was kind of messy. And it said, pro-choice and proud of it. She's holding it up and saying things to people as they walked by. And so I introduced myself to this young woman because she seemed really agitated, but she was happy to talk to me. She said her name was Amanda. And I said, Amanda, what brought you out to the event today? Tell me about your poster. She said, here's the deal. I would never have an abortion. But what you're doing on campus, you have no business as to what goes on in the sex lives of other people, and I think you should leave. I said, oh, well, thank you for your honesty. May I ask you a question? She said, sure. I said, what do you personally oppose about abortion? Why would you never have one? And she did not hesitate in her response. She said, it kills a baby. I said, Amanda, I want to understand your view. Here's what I understand so far. Please tell me if I have it wrong. You think that abortion kills a baby. That was her words, not mine. But you think it should be okay for other people to kill babies. And she looked at me for a second, and that young woman very graciously responded, I've never thought about it that way before. Super gracious response. We had a great conversation. I don't know if I changed her mind. We gave each other things to think about, which is how good dialogue is supposed to go. So somebody says, I would never, but I can't tell other people. Ask them, why would you never? And see what they say. And then, of course, you shouldn't push your morality on other people. You can't push your moral beliefs on other people. That's wrong. Interesting. We'll get back to that one. So we see it all around us. And ladies, it has crept into our churches at alarming rates to where when I put out a silly statement like, it is wrong to torture toddlers for fun, we're kind of like, I don't know what to do with that. I think it's wrong, but some people might not think it's wrong. You see what I'm saying? Like we've gotten there. So, how in the world did we get to this place? I'm going to take a few minutes and do just a brief overview of how we got here. So a little history lesson, and then we'll wrap up with those 4 types of relativism that we see. When I say overview of history, you guys, this is to some extent oversimplified, large extent. But it's helpful to see some of the major players and touch down on some of the big things that happened along the way, with the understanding that history is very complex, that we have received the ideas that have come down to us, which, by the way, C.S. Lewis said they're the most dangerous kinds of ideas, the ones that you simply absorb and never question. So we are products of those who have come before us and the ideas that are all around us. This is just looking at those major ideas in terms of how we viewed morality throughout history as human beings. So when we look at the Old and New Testaments, we see that morality was understood to be real and knowable. The Old Testament writers would ground morality, or the standard of what is good, in God himself, in his character, in who he is. He is good. He is goodness. That's where it comes from. They wrote the law as ways to reveal God's character to the Israelites. He gave them the law to say, here is how my people who are set apart should be. I want you to reflect me to the world. The New Testament writers agreed with all of that. Goodness is grounded in God himself. He is the standard, and he is a transcendent standard. He is beyond us, which is the only way for it to be something real and knowable. We can't create it. It has to exist objectively outside of us. But the New Testament writers added a new element to it, that when you do what is good or you do what is evil, which is the privation of good, according to St. Augustine, what is not good, it actually has significant impact on your soul. But they understood it to be real and knowable. The Jewish and Christian writers, however, were not the only ones who understood that. The Greek thinkers, the big three, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the others, those are just the ones we hear the most about, understood that morality was real and knowable. In other words, morality, our ability to learn it and to abide by it, it is woven into the fabric of reality itself all around us. We discover it, and then we live by it. This is why we see Socrates making the decisions that he made, to his detriment in the end. This is why we see Plato, who talked about the world of the forms or the ideals, a transcendent, perfect reality. That everything here is an image or a type of that. And Plato, the way that he would talk about it, morality was real and we can align our lives with it in certain ways. And then we get all the way to Aristotle, who came just after Plato, was a student of Plato's, who wrote the Aristotelian Ethics. This is why we hear language like duty and virtue when we read about the Greeks. Does some interesting things. If you watch one of my favorite films that's really old at this point, Gladiator, it was made in the year 2000. It's a violent film, but a wonderful story about a virtuous man, Maximus. This was that time period. The way that the Greeks would have understood freedom is so different than the way that we understand it today, and it's directly tied to what we're learning right now. When we talk about freedom, if I ask just any random person on the street, typically I'm going to get an answer like, freedom is the ability to do whatever I want with no consequences. The ability to live with no one to tell me what to do. It's a limited view of freedom that we've come to. We have limited views of many words, including good, love, even sex. But freedom is one of those words, because if you asked Aristotle what freedom is, he would have told you something very different. Freedom is the ability to live as I ought, so that I may flourish. Freedom is the ability that we have, that if we live in a government system or we live in a time and place that allows us to lead virtuous lives, we can choose to live as we ought. Brings us back to interesting things if we think about the here and now. If freedom is the ability to choose whatever I want with no consequences, I don't know that we can call it freedom. Sean McDowell, in his book Chasing Love, would ask the question, are you free to choose not to do that? Can you choose not to? Human beings are set apart from the animal kingdom in our ability to choose other than our desires. If my desires lead me and I do whatever I want without consequences, I don't know if I can call myself human. I look a lot more like an animal. Food for thought. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they understood it was real and knowable, and they understood that for it to be real, it had to come from somewhere beyond us. They did not believe in God, not the Christian God, but they understood that morality was something real and knowable. We move on down the line. I'm going to skip over St. Augustine in the 4th century. He was really helpful because when Plato stepped into the picture and said that the things that really matter are those ideals, those forms, that world beyond us. This world is the one we're trying to get out of and escape so we can get to that place. This is where Platonism came into play. Eventually, Gnosticism, that says that the material world is nasty, dirty, bad. We want to shed these material things and move on. Augustine brought us back to earth and reminded us, actually, God made it all and he called it good. So we're glad for him. Good job, Augustine. Skipping a lot. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century, he took Aristotle's ethics, he took Aristotle's philosophy, and he married it to Christian theology. the true elements that matched Christian theology or would uphold and support Christian theology. And so we have a rich Christian philosophical tradition through the writings of Aquinas. If you read a lot of Catholic writers, it's called the natural law way of approaching things. So they understood it. Aquinas said, we are reasonable people. We can know right from wrong. We can learn it because it's real. When we get to past the reformers of the 1500s and in the late 16th century, early 17th century, we meet a new player. We meet René Descartes. Now, René Descartes, fascinating man, brilliant man, but I'm going to pick on him for just a minute, though I think that what he was doing had unintended consequences. René Descartes was a philosopher, a mathematician, one of those whole soul people who lived at a time when science was booming. Lots was happening in the sciences. Scientific advance, scientific method, right? Making the way for the scientific revolution. So he's watching all of this taking place, and he's fascinated by it. It just so happened that in this time in history when he was alive, philosophy was rather stagnant. In other words, not that it wasn't wonderful, but that there weren't new discoveries being made all the time. So the sciences seem to be, from his perspective, outpacing philosophy. And so René Descartes, watching the scientists, was seeing that everything they did, they started their experiments by doubting everything. And he said, oh, that seems like a good plan. And I'll tell you what, ladies, in science, it is a good plan. Science is limited to the study of the natural world. So if I'm a scientist, I'm going to start by doubting everything and discover what I can until I might learn something new about the natural world. It's limited. But Descartes said, let's try that in philosophy. Let's start our thought experiments by doubting everything. You guys foresee a problem with that? Philosophy is meant to operate like a floodlight. When you read, that's why it's maddening to read philosophers. Because you start to read them, and you're like, they're going to get to the point. And you think, okay, they're going to say, no, we're not. We're going to circumnavigate the globe of ideas. And now maybe he'll say what he wants. Oh, no, okay, we're going around again. We're still, okay, well, this is a long journey. And now at the end of whatever chapter, boom, the philosopher says the thing they wanted to say to begin with. But now it makes sense in light of all the other things. Philosophy is a floodlight. Descartes took that floodlight and turned it into a laser beam. His thought was, we can make it really efficient. Oh, it did that. It made philosophy very efficient. It changed the way philosophy was done from that point moving on, largely. But it took away a lot about it that was profound. We lost the floodlight. You guys ever tried to find like lost keys in a dark room with a laser beam? How'd that go for you, right? So historically speaking, that's what happened. And it had unintended consequences. Blaise Pascal, the mathematician and philosopher, one of my favorite people to study in history. He was a contemporary of Descartes. And you could almost see the conversation happening as Pascal came onto the scene and was saying things essentially like, this is not going to go well for you. I think Pascal was someone who had a lot of questions. Ladies, if you're someone with a lot of questions or even doubts, did you know that's okay? It's okay to ask big questions. It's okay to sit down in your question, because if you're willing to sit down in the question and follow the evidence where it leads, I'm confident that your faith will grow deeper. Pascal had a lot of questions, so maybe he saw a little more of the world than some of his contemporaries did. Then we get to the turn of the 17th century Enlightenment, and we meet a new player by the name of David Hume. David Hume was an atheist, brilliant philosopher, dangerous ideas. I would not want to go toe-to-toe with this man in a debate. But David Hume dropped a brand new idea into the well of human history called empiricism. And here's what that means. David Hume was interested in how we know things. The branch of philosophy that we're talking about is epistemology, the study of knowledge. He was interested in our ability to know things. And so his big idea, empiricism, said the things that are real and knowable, the things that count as truth, are the things you study empirically, which just means with your senses. If you can touch it, taste it, see it, hear it, smell it, if you can scientific method it, you're allowed to know it. But if you cannot study it with your senses empirically, it doesn't count as true knowledge. Hume's empiricism was like an atomic bomb on the history of Western thought. This is the effect it had. Because there are many things that we don't learn or know empirically. Now, we could pause here. Somebody could raise their hand. If Dr. Hume were up here, I'm assuming he was Dr. Hume. I don't really know. But if he were up here talking, somebody could raise their hand. Excuse me, Mr. Hume, excuse me. I am not a PhD in philosophy like you are, sir, but I do have a question. Can you demonstrate to me empirically why empiricism ought to be the grounds of all that counts as true knowledge? Mr. Hume, can you do that? Ladies, what do you think? Can he do it? He cannot. He cannot. Empiricism should never have gotten off the ground because it's not even able to hold itself up. But ideas have consequences. And it did. It dropped into the well. And what it did is it split our thinking in two. So that we have, if you think of two railroad tracks, if what we've been doing is following a timeline of Western thought where morality was real and knowable, and then we get to the 17th century Enlightenment and that atomic bomb happens, I want you to imagine two parallel lines now running the rest of the way to where we are, and they're still going. On that bottom parallel line, on that bottom railroad track, we have the facts realm. This is composed of the things you can study empirically. Facts. Science is the thing that determines all that we can know. Those are the objective things. We have all kinds of isms that rolled out of this, historically speaking. Some of you have heard of them. Rationalism, materialism, scientism, modernism. The ability to conquer the world through science and technology. And we're still very much living in that. But we also have that top railroad track, because if we take the science and we go, well, we can study these things empirically. Well, what does this do to the things you can't study empirically? Well, those things are relegated to the values realm. Those are values. We can't study values empirically. You know, like religion, morality, beauty. So those things must be subjective. Can't know them. Can't demonstrate them empirically. So that's what they are. They're subjective. You decide those for yourself. Or at least that's what it became. And that railroad track has its own isms that rolled out, historically speaking. The first major reaction was one that you'll be familiar with. Ladies, when this happened, when this was unfolding in terms of the ideas of that world and that time and that place in Europe, we had these brave, stoic British scientists and thinkers looking at the universe. And suddenly they're confronted with a new possible truth. It's not true, but it was to them, they're going, this must be the way it is, because they're adopting David Hume's idea. They're looking out at the night sky. And up to this point, when people looked at the night sky, they had a certain way of talking about it. They would look at the night sky and they would say, the heavens proclaim the glory of God, and the skies above tell us his handiwork. That was King David, Psalm 19. The medievals would look at the night sky and they would talk about the heavens, and they would talk about the music of the spheres. Remember, if you've read the Chronicles of Narnia, in The Magician's Nephew, how did Narnia come into being? It was sung into being. I don't think Lewis got that wrong. That's, just thinking about it. Don't take that as biblical fact. But I don't know that he got that wrong, given that neuroscientists today, not neuroscientists, astrophysicists today, are getting pulses from far off celestial bodies that are musical in nature, and they don't really know what to do with that. I just think that's interesting. The heavens, the heavenly bodies, the music of the spheres. Now suddenly we have scientists looking out at the night sky and going, if this is true, then I must adopt it. And we had a new word that entered our vernacular, and the word was space. Vast, empty, meaningless space. Oh, that heavenly body, I can explain that. That's just a star. That's just a burning ball of gases, chemical chain effect, like cause and effect chain reaction that's happening in the night sky. We can tell you what it's composed of. We can explain it all. And just like that one example and the many that followed, our world reduced the way that it saw itself. We have a just a problem, ladies. It's just a star. Oh, that church building that raises your eyes to the heavens when you walk in, that's just a gathering place. It's just church on Sunday morning. My husband won't even allow our kids to say we're going to church. He's like, no, you're not. You are the church. You're going to church gathering, not just a. The number of people who eat meals in their cars driving from A to B, it's just fuel for the body. Get me to the next thing. The first major reaction was those who looked at that world and looked at what these scientists were saying and said, I will not live in a world that is that hideous. You've stripped the world of everything about it that is magical in the best way, not the Harry Potter sense. Magical. Ladies, we live in a God-soaked universe. My friend Paul Gould will tell you. A God-soaked universe. We should expect to encounter the supernatural every day. The medievals did. But we've lost some of that. We stripped the world of the magic. So the first major reaction was Romanticism. But they bought David Hume's premise, and so those values remained personal and subjective. And the isms that flowed from that kept them that way. So you had Romanticism, and then on down the line, you have other ones that lead all the way, like existentialism, right? Marxism in a curious kind of way, all the way down to postmodernism. And now we live in a universe or a world that's clashing between the modern and the postmodern, a post-truth or a post-truth culture. But it all is the consequences of ideas. Soon after that, Immanuel Kant tried to save morality. He tried. Another philosopher, not necessarily a Christian thinker, but he realized, man, if we lose morality as something that's real, we're in big trouble. You think? Here's how he tried to solve it. He bought David Hume's premise, and he said, morality might be real, but if it is real, we can't get at it. We can't get to it because we are trapped behind our sense perceptions. Follow me here. You can't get at what's really real because you're trapped behind what your senses perceive. You live in your interpretation or your perception of the world, and that's the best you've got. But we have to pretend like it's real, even if we can't get at it because we don't want to lose morality. It's a gross oversimplification of Immanuel Kant's thinking, but ladies, if you understand his thinking, come and find me later. It's crazy. But I know that he said that. I have another question for him. Excuse me, Mr. Kant. Excuse me. How do you know that we're all trapped behind our sense perceptions? Like, did you bust out of yours so you could take a look around and go, yep, you're all trapped, and then jump back in? His view shouldn't have gotten off the ground either, but it did. And ideas have consequences. And we're living in a world today that is confused and that no longer views morality as real and knowable. Guys, we have university campuses that are divided. If we took the uni out, Whereas you can still go to Oxford and Cambridge and even some of the older universities here and find etched above the doorways that theology is the queen of the sciences, the unifying factor, because God unifies it all, because if he is the source of truth, then everything that is true at all is true because it flows from his very being. Jesus said, I am the truth. In fact, technically he said, I am the truth, and he wasn't stuttering. He was making a divine claim about himself. Our university campuses, though, guys, I meet students all the time who are studying drama and want nothing to do with their classmates who are studying chemistry. They have nothing in common. I meet students all the time who are music majors who won't even sit at the lunch table with the math majors because they don't like each other. And we forgot that Christianity never separated these things. Next slide. Christianity has held them together from day one and has never torn them apart because of Christ as the unifying factor of all true things. Which is why, just in short, you can listen to Johann Sebastian Bach's music. It demands a lot of you. It's harder to listen to than the Beatles or Tom Petty or any of the others. Beautiful things demand things of us. But if you do the hard work of listening, it will bring you to tears with its beauty. And we have to realize in the same breath that Bach's music is so mathematically perfect that computer programmers use it to write code. Christianity never separated the math from the music, the art from the chemistry, the body from the soul. It's held them together, and it does so still. So the types of relativism you'll run into quickly. These won't take long to describe to you. I'm going to give them interesting names from the book Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair, so you'll get both the name that's easy to remember and the technical name for it. The first type you'll run into if you ever take an anthropology class on a college campus is society does relativism. This is cultural relativism. This is where you will hear a professor describe to you other societies. This society does it this way. That society does it that way. This society practices racial genocide. That society has forceful child labor laws. That society treats women badly. But who are we to say that any one of those is better than another? Ladies, for a moral relativist, you can't. There's no such thing as better. There's no standard by which to judge something as better. The problem with society does relativism is all it does is describe to us what other societies do. It cannot prescribe anything that we ought to do. You can't get that classic statement. You can't get from an is to an ought, the way that a society is to the way that it ought to be. It cannot make that leap for us. Society does relativism, just gives us descriptions, and that is all. The second type of relativism that is prominent today is society says relativism. Formal name is conventionalism. Society says relativism says that a given society creates morality for itself. It decides what is right or wrong for that society. This is where we get societal contract or moral contract theory. If you ever talk to an atheist who holds to that type of thinking, well, morality is grounded in particular societies. Trial and error, they decide what works best, and so they make their own laws. Ladies, if society says relativism is true, there is no such thing as an immoral society. There can't be. There's no such thing as one society that can be better than another. There's no such thing as better for a moral relativist. There's no standard. And if each society decides its own laws, then by default, the laws of that society are moral. There's no such thing as an immoral law. Which throws us for a loop when we think about the moral reformers that we celebrate all the time and look up to. What do we do with Martin Luther King Jr. on this view? He would have been immoral for going against the laws of his given society. Corrie ten Boom should have stayed in the concentration camp. for going against the laws of her given society. This was the reasoning that the Nazis appealed to in the Nuremberg trials. We weren't doing anything wrong. We were simply following the laws of our given society. And it didn't hold up. I say relativism is the third type. This is the most common in the United States. Individual ethical relativism. That's your truth. The problems with it are similar. If I say relativism is true, and the individual is who decides what's right or wrong for him or herself, then there can be no such thing as an immoral individual. Mother Teresa, she preferred to feed children. Adolf Hitler, he preferred to torture and murder them. Who are we to say that one was better than the other? The moral relativists cannot. There's no such thing as better. There is no standard. And finally, a fourth type of relativism. We're seeing this one more and more. It's called I can't say relativism. It's that word that we visited a little while ago dealing with knowledge, epistemology. This is epistemological relativism. I can't say what's right or wrong. I can't get at it. I'm trapped behind something. Immanuel Kant would have been a poster child for this. I'm trapped behind my sense perceptions. But with the rise in different critical theories, we're hearing it more and more. You cannot understand my world. You are trapped behind, and you name it. Some would say your religious upbringing. Some would say your language community. That was Brad Kallenberg, the 20th century philosopher. Some would say you're trapped behind your privilege. You're trapped behind your whatever. Fill in the blank. You can't understand. You can't know, denoting ability. Ladies, this is ripping at the very heart of what it means to be human. This is as if we don't share a common human nature, a common humanity, and an imagination, which is a truth-bearing faculty that would enable you to ask for someone's story and gain understanding. We were made to communicate by a communicative God. And all that I can't say relativism is doing right now on university campuses and throughout the culture, because it typically flows that way, is isolating people and separating them, or other order, separating and isolating, and the enemy is having a heyday with that. At the end of the day, as a closing idea here, relativism cannot say why anything is truly wrong. It can't. There's no standard. There's no such thing as wrong. Ladies, the next time somebody says you shouldn't push your morality on other people, ask them, why not? Ask them with gentleness. Why not? Whatever the response is, it'll have something to do with being wrong. It's wrong for you to do that, which means, what have they just done to you? The very thing they've accused you of doing to them, you're just asking a question to reveal it, which is a gracious thing to do. Understand that we're not talking about the problem of evil today. That is a huge question, and we can talk about it a little bit if you want to. But I want you to understand that it is not just a problem for Christians. Everyone who lives in this world understands something is broken in the world. Something is wrong with the world. Everybody complains about the problem of evil. Rightly so. The Christians are the ones who are shoved in the corner and expected to answer the problem of evil. And we do have answers of many kinds. Intellectual answers, we understand why evil exists. And in fact, the fact that evil exists is excellent evidence for God's existence. Emotional answers are trickier. Somebody's asking me from the heart, why did this happen to me? The only correct answer I have is, I don't know. Willful problems of evil, different problems of evil, but everyone struggles with it. And ladies, I just want you to imagine, just for a second, one thing this week that broke your heart. One thing. And there are many, because we are exposed with our technology in high definition from 14 angles on a global scale, evil unfolding in the world at a rate that we were never meant to handle. One thing. You got it? You holding it? The best that the relativist can give you for that thing is, I don't prefer that. Christianity has all the depth and width and breadth to call it what it is, to say that is evil, and it never should have been that way, and that there's a way things should be, and that God is making it so. Hold on. Hold on. Okay. I've taken a little too much time on this. Thanks, Susie. But I'm going to finish there. And how would you like to transition, my friend? Okay. Why don't we pray for a moment, and then we'll go right to table discussions. You guys take those in the direction that you would like to take them. You have a guide there, but you're not held to it. Let's pray together. Abba, that we get to call you Daddy is an incredible, incredible thing that you have made possible because you wanted to. You loved us. You sought us out. You won us back. And you invite us. God, we receive the invitation. Thank you, God, for making a world that is ordered. Thank you, God, for making sense. Thank you for being a God of order and good and love and all things good and tov. God, I pray your blessing on these women here today. I pray, God, that you will take this offering of whatever words came out and that you will make it the great feast that they will take and help others. As we discuss things now, God, I pray our conversations, our laughter, our shared stories, our ideas, our revelations, that they all would bring you so much glory. In Jesus' name, amen. And the other, after the boring lecture's over, then I get to ask what I really want to learn. And the other hero of mine says, Q&A is when you get to plumb the depths of my ignorance. And so there you have it. It's a little bit awkward because I have so many women walking around hearing conversations going, I would like to do Q&A with you. So anyhow, thank you. How would I answer, is it okay to torture a toddler for fun? So, I'll repeat the questions for the sake of the recording, and that will. I would have said given the nature of the game, I would have called that an objective kind of claim. And I would have said that it's wrong to torture toddlers for any reason, much less for fun. But then typically that would lead to a deeper conversation. Because underneath that question, you would have questions about, what is a toddler? And it's a human being at a particular stage of development. What does it mean to be human? Well, this is also a deep question that we have to ask. And so all of that, in a nutshell, would come right back down to the essential teaching of the Imago Dei in Scripture, that human beings are a particular kind of thing, that God endowed us with unspeakable worth. That was something that was endowed. It cannot be earned, and it cannot be taken. You matter because you're human. So toddlers matter because they're human and ought not be treated in such a way. But that holds true for any human being. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm just curious if this is your opinion. In the different forms of relativism that you mentioned, it seems to me that one kind of rolls into the next.
Ah.
And I'm just wondering if you think that we're kind of maybe on the edge of leaving the individual ethical moral relativism and moving into I can't say the I can't use this word,
Epistemological.
relativism.
Yes, the question is, do I think that the types of relativism that we covered, the four types, kind of each flows into the next? And do I think that in the United States, we'll keep it here, we could say in the West, are we heading out of an individual ethical relativism and more into an I can't say type of relativism? That's a good question. I don't know that it's that cut and dry in terms of what we're heading out of and into. I will say that each of them does more or less flow into the next, but each one also has its limitations. They're all forms of morality being something that we dictate, we create. And so it's reduced to matters of personal preference or societal preference in some way. What I will say, if I were doing this in a Summit Ministries crowd with young adults, because they would have heard lectures on different worldviews, one of which is the Marxist worldview. The I can't say relativism really shows up in that worldview. Every worldview has to answer life's biggest questions. So again, worldviews, stories of reality, the way that we understand the world to be. The Christian worldview, I would say, is the true story of reality. And I would say that objectively. I think it's actually true, not just true for me, but true. And so when I look at another worldview like Marxism, I have to compare how does it answer life's biggest questions? What does it mean to be human question, for example? Human beings are a dime a dozen. They're there to serve the state. Who is the savior in the Marxist worldview? The government is the savior in the Marxist worldview. It's economically driven. And so a lot of that is there. So what we're seeing, I think, could be a mix of Marxist ideology that is kind of swept through, but it's going to look a lot like that. I can't say relativism, or it's going to have that as a part of it. I don't know that we're moving out of one and into the other. I think that we see both, and it's important to be able to go, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here, as we're taking thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ and able to go, I see a little bit of what's happening here. Let me ask you some more questions about that so we can get back to what makes sense. The Marxist worldview is all about answers through revolution. There's never really a settling. It's just continual. And I'm pretty sure Jesus said it is finished. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. A couple of questions in there, Sally. So one is, how do we become better question askers? And the second is, if you get to a point in a conversation with someone where you're like, I don't know where else to go from here, that's going to happen. And there's a couple reasons for that. So let me answer the second one and then the first one about the question asking. When it comes to having a conversation with someone, you guys, I'm going to give you a rubric for asking questions and then a resource in just a minute. I have not always been good at asking questions, especially out loud, or is settling into a posture in a conversation. What I do know about conversations with people is no matter what I give you by way of a rubric or a resource, conversations are messy. They're unpredictable because people are complex, and the ideas that we hold are complex. And I'm just going to, here's a word to the wise here that I had to learn the hard way, but now you won't have to. In conversations about moral things, and often in conversations about your faith, I would not readily expect to change someone's mind on the spot, ever. My expectations would be set rather low when it comes to what impact I'm going to have in that moment. So the resource, I'll name it, it's Tactics by Greg Koukl, Koukl. He is the president and founder of Stand to Reason, the organization I work for. And I don't just recommend his book Tactics because He's my boss. I recommend it because long before I ever met Greg Kokel, that book changed my life in the way that I would talk to people. Tactics. A Game Plan for Discussing Your Christian Convictions by Greg Kokel. I would buy the updated edition because you get more in that one. So when you get to a point in a conversation where you don't know where else to go, it's just going to happen. When I'm talking about the pro-life issue, for example, the argument that I would give if I gave it to you as a syllogism, like a premise, conclusion, it would go, it is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings, which most people would say, I agree. The second premise is, abortion intentionally kills innocent human beings. And many people would say, I do not agree. So that's where the conversation typically happens. But if those two premises hold, deductively, the conclusion that abortion is wrong, therefore abortion is wrong, flows naturally from them. I'm often asked, Megan, what do you do if somebody disagrees with premise 1? It is wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. I would tell them, you probably should run away. Right? That's a very different conversation. So I'm not going to change someone's mind on the spot. And I may get to places where my knowledge is, that's all I can help them with. That's all I know. I think at that point we should be humble enough to say, I don't really know where to go from here. But I know that you've said that, and you're going to have to be the one to explain why that is. Because intuitively, I think they know better. At that point, I think you just done all you can do. Now, to give you the question rubric, that will help when you get to that point. There are 3 types of questions that Greg would teach you to ask in the first couple of chapters of his book. That's what I'm going to give you right now. And then he goes into many more specifics from there. But if you just know these 3 questions, it'll change the way you interact with people. The first type of question in a conversation, by the way, he calls this the Columbo tactic. These 3 questions are the some of you are laughing because you know who Lieutenant Columbo is. I don't know if did they let you have posters of Peter Falk on your wall? I don't know. For younger people in the room, he's the grandfather in The Princess Bride who reads the story. Okay. Lieutenant Columbo was a television detective, and I think it might have been one of the, if not the longest running series of all time. NCIS might beat it by now. I don't know. But Lieutenant Columbo was kind of a bumbling, brilliant detective. And every time he would show up at a crime scene, he would have on a wrinkled trench coat that looked like he slept in it. He would usually have a cigar. And he would always be looking for a pencil because he could never find his. And he'd kind of walk around very unassuming, like he looked like a bumbling idiot. And he'd be walking around, and but his line was, hey, I can't do the accent. He's like, can I ask you a question? Like that was kind of his thing. And he would keep doing that. Well, this is something bothering me about this. Can I ask you another question? Like keep on going until like the end of every episode was pretty much the same, where the bad guy had just had enough and was like, I did it, okay? Like he would drive them crazy with his question asking, but it was always, I just can't, do you have a pencil? I can't find my pen. Can I ask you a question? And it was just this unassuming way of paying attention to the details and asking questions to learn more. So Greg took that and turned it into this Columbo tactic. The first type of question that we can always ask in a conversation is one that gathers information. It's the what question. So if you think of yourself as an investigative journalist, the standard form of this question is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? You're just asking for clarification. You might be asking for defining terms. If they say love is love, you might ask, what do you mean by love? How would you define that? I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing, right? If they make a wild claim like, well, I think killing people is fine, you might run away, or you might ask, what do you mean? Like, explain it to me. Help me understand your view. So you're just looking for information about their view. You could ask this question all day long. You could even use it to repeat back to them what you've learned and make sure that you have it right. You don't want to misrepresent someone else's view when you're in a conversation with them. You want to make sure you handle it carefully and that you're understanding what they're saying to you. You don't want to straw man them, in other words. And kind of we do that as Christians. We're real good because we think we got to jump on the defensive every time. And we're like, that's Marxist and I know and this is. And they're like, who's Marx? You know what I'm saying? Like, ask them what they think. So what do you mean? What does that term mean? Here's what I understand so far. Is that right? It's just information gathering. The second type of question you can ask is the why question. You're asking for their reasons. The standard form of the question is, how did you come to that conclusion? Or why do you believe that? Those first two questions, you can be on with someone for an hour, 2 hours, days, weeks, back and forth, back and forth. Tell me why. Tell me more. Wait, what's that term? Okay, clear on that. Okay, why do you think that? One little trick I'll throw in here that we need to remember and stamp on our foreheads, put it on your sticky note, whatever it is that you need. When you're talking to someone else, and they make a claim about something, they bear what is called the burden of proof. Anyone who's ever studied law or debate understands this term, the burden of proof. And Greg would want you to understand that he or she who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. So the next time somebody comes at you and attacks your faith, you Christians, you're just so willing to believe these myths that were written down by flawed humans thousands of years ago, and you think the rest of the world needs to read it and get on board. Like, what is your problem? I guarantee 90% of this room, the first go-to was, no, you don't understand. So the scriptures were divinely inspired by God, and then the men who wrote them, they were divinely inspired. So yes, they were flawed, but God isn't. And it is his true word, because 2 Timothy and this and that. And then there was the council and the council and the council, and now we have, and this is 99% accurate. The original documents, those were divinely inspired, infallible, the unchanging word of God. Like that's 90% of you like, this is where I would go with that. You don't have to go there. Who made the claim? He did or she did. Who bears the burden of proof? Not you. Oh, really? Why do you think they're myths? In other words, how did you come to that conclusion? You could ask it a million different ways. Why should I believe that? That's not my view. Interesting that you would think that. Tell me, what do you mean by myth? Tell me, what do you mean by flawed humans? Are you human? Are you flawed? Why should I believe you? That was snooty. Don't do that. Self-control. Okay, so that's the second question. Question about that question? Sure. My experience is they get so riled up. Yep. Good. Okay. Good question. How do you engage, or what is my experience in engaging others in that type of dialogue? Because in your experience, they tend to get really worked up. Okay. Good question. We're at 2 questions now. I have a third to give you, so don't let me forget. To that, it's unpredictable. And I only get to have control over me. This is what we teach our kids in school, right? Well, I don't know about what they're going to do, but you are in control of yourself, ma'am or sir, right? And you're going to act accordingly. So we are responsible to be faithful with what we've been given. We are responsible to be gentle, to be self-controlled. And I'll tell you right now, if anybody in that conversation gets angry because of me, I lose. But if you're in the conversation and they get worked up, it could be for any number of reasons. Oftentimes, when you ask that second Columbo question, you guys, these are powerful things, these questions. These will change the way you do dialogue and discourse. Sometimes you ask somebody the why do you think that question, And you're going to get met with a couple of things. You might get met with what Greg calls the sound of silence, right? Simon and Garfunkel said it first. You might get met with rage. And the reason for it, who knows what you've unlocked? Sometimes you ask them the why question, and they have nothing to step back on except a void. They don't know why they think that. Oprah said it. We adopt ideas all the time. So a couple things from that. We have the responsibility of being able to answer those questions also, which will drive you crazy for a hot minute. And then you'll learn a new posture, and it will be good, and it will deepen your faith if you will do the work and do the hard work. But sometimes in a conversation, if somebody else gets mad, which is something I don't get to control, except for I'm trying not to make them mad with my personality, my tone, my different things. I can ask a good question, though, which is an inviting thing. It's not threatening. So usually it goes very well. But if I see that they grow angry or there's something flips or something like that, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and go, oh, whoa, and I'm going to acknowledge it. And typically I'll just narrate what's happening. This is great if you have teenagers in the house. Teenagers is also great for you with one another or with mom and dad. I'll say something that I have just said made you angry. I see that. I see that you're very passionate about this. I did not intend to make you angry. Could you please tell me what I said? Tell me what happened in the conversation just now, because this was not my intent. And then pause and hear them out. And that will typically help diffuse it a little bit so you understand where things went amiss. And you can clear it up. Oh, no, I think you misheard me. Let me try again. Or, I see. Okay, and sometimes they just get mad. And you have to say, I did not intend to make you angry. I'm sorry about that, but thank you for talking with me. And that's as far as you get to go. You guys, ladies, you are intuitively able to know in a conversation when you kind of reach the point, because you can feel that palpable tension. And so you can navigate that carefully. Sometimes the Spirit will prod you to keep going, keep pressing, and sometimes you'll know this is not the time. So you can ask that 1 and 2, 1 and 2 all day long. And if you don't know where to go from there, just thank them for their time. If it's someone that you know and have a relationship with, then it's an easy, you know what? You have given me so much to think about. I want to have some time. You know what? Can I buy you a coffee next week? Would you be willing to meet with me? I'll buy the coffee. And then I'd love to continue the conversation, but I got to sit on some of the things you shared with me for a bit so I know how to respond well. Guys, this stuff is... Let me share this now. Because it's in the second session, so that way we'll just have to touch on it. Dr. Kelly Kapic is a theologian at Covenant College, North Georgia. Brilliant guy. He wrote a book called You're Only Human. You're Only Human. You are with the apostrophe R-E. You guys know. Okay. It's a book about finitude or limits. So it's a theological treatise on our limits as human beings. And so what he says in that book, his thesis is, God made us limited before the fall, and he called it very good. He made us with limits. So the whole book talks about our relationship with different things, the modern world, our way of thinking, the way that we've even impacted the way we do church, all of that. And he's kind of addressing some things that will help you just kind of take a deep breath. It's a meaty book. Do the audio book. I wish that, it's one of those audio books where I'm like, you should have read it, Kelly. Not this person, but that's okay. In that book, one of the major takeaways is something that he observed about the world that we live in. And he said, America has 2 virtues that are higher than any of the other virtues. And the highest virtues of our culture right now, and you're going to feel it when I say it, are productivity and efficiency. Productivity and efficiency. Those are the highest virtues of our culture. Do more. Do it faster, do it better, be perfect, do more, such that when I work with college students, I'm working with individuals who quite literally cannot physically do all that is demanded of them in a 24-hour period. And we wonder, why are we stressed out? Why are we anxious? Why do I feel out of control? Why are my children angry all the time or stressed or having trouble or whatever? There's many components to these things, but that's one. Kelly would say, well, he'd ask the question, do you think that God is productive and efficient? And we would say, he did speak the world into being, so probably so. Kelly would say, are those his highest virtues? To which we would answer, not even a little bit. What is God's highest virtue, ladies? What is the greatest commandment? And he said, love God, and the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. Love is God's highest virtue. Dr. Kapik would tell you, love, biblically speaking, the way that it's defined biblically, which is not how it's defined culturally, love is the most inefficient thing you can do. Ooh, we felt that one. It is inefficient, and there's the rub, Shakespeare said. So love is inefficient. In these conversations, they are very inefficient. That's the point. Somebody's going to get mad. And I mean, by the way, I get it. That's why our expectations are low in terms of, well, I'm going to come and change this person's whole life. First of all, we don't do the changing. That's the Spirit's job. But he will use you. Greg will tell you our role day to day is much more like what Susie shared, that my mentor shared with me in the beginning. We are gardeners. We get up every day, and with the things that we have, we go and we till the garden. Notice I didn't say the machine, which is what our world thinks of itself. The garden. It's tedious, and it's multifaceted, and there are many elements, and it's more about nurturing than it is about fixing a part and setting it on its way, right? It's a garden, and we are gardeners. Not many of us get to be harvesters often. So in conversations, you may say something that sets somebody off and makes them mad in the moment. And I get that. Like, how much do you love having your deeply held convictions called into question? When somebody does that, are you like, oh my gosh, thank you so much? Like, no, that's hard. And we don't want to let go of those because they're attached to all the other messy things. People we love, experiences we've had, all of which we have to bring under the authority of the Word of God and His goodness. And we have a hard time with that. That's sanctification. But it may be that 5 days from that conversation, or 5 years, or 5 decades, that person will wake up and realize that the thing you said that they got angry about that day because they didn't know the answer, it made them feel afraid or exposed or whatever it was that happened in that moment, but you treated them with gentleness, power, self-control, that they wake up and go, I think she was right. And that's the Spirit. So that was the most long-winded answer to a question of all time. I pray that somewhere in there your question was addressed in some way. And then I'll tell you the third question in the Columbo tactic is one where you actually get to present a little bit of the information you already have, things you know, but you do it in the form of a question. So let's say they say something about the Bible and its trustworthiness, but you have some information about that. And you're like, oh, I could share something with them that would be helpful here. You don't just have to give it to them or teach at them. You can kind of sit back and go, hey, tell me, have you considered this? Have you thought about this? And the this is more or less the implications of their view. Have you thought about this? Or a piece of information that you want to share. Have you considered this when you were thinking about all of that? So it's a have you considered question where you get to share something, but you're still asking a question. Again, the book is Tactics, and it will be a wonderful resource for you. You can find Greg lecturing on it. Our whole team is able to teach on this and whatnot. So it's wonderful, and it will change your life, and it'll make you feel crazy for just a minute because you'll start asking yourself the questions. Just know that.
Megan, would you be willing to pray for our lunch?
Yes, of course. Ooh. Lord, you were the one who knew how to nourish. I just think about the feast that you provided on a mountainside and the way that it was not like the feast that Herod provided for his guests. God, you gave people a place to lie down in the cool grass You fed their souls, and then you fed their bodies, because you knew that we are limited, embodied image bearers of you. I pray, God, that you would bless this time as we take food together, that you would bless our conversations, and that this meal would be a reminder of provision. The feast that we have, God, would remind us of the feast that you give us and of the provision that you made possible through your work and your life and your death and your resurrection. In Jesus' name, amen.